Welcome back to Talk the Walk with me, Sarah Wong. I'm with Clifford Bennett, Chief Economist of ACY Securities. He joins us from Sydney, Australia. Thank you very much, Clifford, for coming to Talk the Walk. You're just talking about the risk factors and the inflationary pressure in the global economy, and I want to ask you about the World Bank's latest forecast. The World Bank has further downgraded the global economic forecast for this year to 3.2%, and the International Monetary Fund also followed suit and downgraded its economic forecast. Is that in line with your projections?
I think what we can be reasonably confident of, Sarah, is that those forecasts are too high. I think, unfortunately, I think we're going to see lower numbers than those. In fact, when they previously were hiking their forecast to rather extreme levels, I remember writing a piece saying, well, they'll be unwinding those forecasts in the not too distant future. And that was before Ukraine. So I kind of saw that there was going to be a hangover effect of all the stimulus measures surrounding COVID. So basically what happens when countries overspend, or not overspend, they provided a stimulus to keep the economy going, to kickstart the economy, where in different parts of the world where economies were coming out of lockdowns just to get the economy back on its feet. That brought forward economic activity out of the future. And that's something a lot of people have failed to consider. People decided to do the renovations now that maybe they would have left for later. But of course, for every country, it's a different story. Some country, the lockdowns were so strict that you couldn't do anything at all. And then there was a burst of activity after the lockdowns. But that has a similar impact of creating a little bit, not necessarily a severe, but a little bit of an economic valley or dip, sort of 12 to 18 months out from that point. So I saw the world economy having that slight hangover effect post what was fabulous economic data in real time coming out of countries around the world in terms of, the coming out of COVID lockdowns, these spurts in economic data. But on Main Street, it was both catch up, bringing forward of economic activity that wouldn't last.
Now you talk about hangover measures and stimulus. The World Bank is planning a new crisis response package of about $170 billion to cover the span of 15 months to blunt the impact of the war of Ukraine, inflation, and COVID. Will that alter your assessment of the global economic outlook, especially when the IMF is also expecting faster inflation?
Yeah, I wish I could say yes, Sarah, but I really can't. Once a problem becomes so ingrained or entrenched, it can reach the point where it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it. And also these announcements, how much of that money actually ends up getting to small businesses, medium-sized businesses, populations in a very real and practical sense. It's doubtful that the programs will be 100% fulfilled. It's wonderful that they are doing this because I do see this inflation, this economic slowdown, really affecting poorer communities within every economy and poorer nations in the world more than the rich. And that is going to be an intensifying problem over the next 1 to 3 years, I would think, out of all of this. So it is great to see the IMF and the World Bank being ahead of the curve and ready to put these packages together. One just hopes that all of those funds do get out there to the people who need them. The fact that the IMF and the World Bank are slashing forecasts and announcing crisis packages, as you have outlined, really just confirms the point that it isn't a case of any kind of nirvana economic future that perhaps many people were hoping for.
Well, now we talk about the war in Ukraine, definitely add more pressure on food prices, energy prices, and just food security in general. And that's only because Ukraine and Russia provide 30% of the world's wheat and barley, 1/5 of its maize, and over half of its sunflower oil. Together, their grain provides more than 1/3 of the wheat imported by 45 African and least developed countries. Now, Clifford, you've said yourself, neither food nor oil supplies is easily replaced. Help us gain a sense of the outlook of commodity prices in the middle to the long run? What kind of territory are we heading into?
Okay, well, very well said, Sarah. And I think it's something we need to pay more attention to, as you know, in the media and as economists. I think we need to be making a lot more noise about how 45 countries in Africa, and even in the West, even in Europe, even in surprising locations, we're going to see not just higher food prices or not just higher energy prices, but actually scarcity of some basic foods,
Absolutely.
scarcity sometimes of energy. So it's not just this market reaction to the war of lifting commodity prices, agricultural and mineral. It's an actual risk of scarcity of these products. And the world hasn't really faced this before. This is something almost out of a science fiction film, much as COVID was, that we really have to begin to comprehend. We're aware that the world's population continues to expand quickly, and that's a great thing because more people, the more fun we can all have. But it does mean that resources become an issue. And this the tragedy of Ukraine and the situation there, and it's not just an immediate impact. For instance, in Ukraine, if they aren't able to plant for the next season, that will be a whole harvest lost. So, we could be in 12 months' time again having a third or an ongoing decline in supply of the foods that you have mentioned. And that means that for commodity prices in general, to answer your question, I see that big move we've just had to the upside across energy and food as only the first wave of what could be a much bigger trend. For instance, I really do think there is a risk. So I may not get this right, but I think everyone needs to just sit back for a moment and consider, what if this is correct? What if the rally in commodity prices was a first wave and then it's rejected and then this is long period of consolidation, but we have started to see markets start to turn up again, commodity prices, a little bit heavy this week at times, but I think commodity prices overall are again starting to push bias to the upside. I'm really seeing why oil could go to $150 a barrel. It was close last time, it could actually get there, and oil could go to $180 a barrel within 6 to 12 months. And that starts to really impact the global economy. But, what we really have to consider is food shortages or entire populations having to change the nature of their basic food items. Because one thing we know about the world is, and we saw it in COVID, is that the poorer nations will be the last to be looked after in this regard. So we need to be mindful of that.
Yeah, on that note, we have a quick minute here, but I do want to talk about the impact on low-income economies and emerging markets, especially with what we've seen lately in the market like Tunisia and Sri Lanka. Some experts, they're worried about the compounding effect of the COVID pandemic, the war in Ukraine, tightening monetary policy, and rising energy prices on stressed debtor countries. Now, the World Bank reckons 60% of low-income countries are already in debt distress or at high risk of it. How do you see that part of the global economy playing out?
Yes, sir. I mean, if you were going to write an economic horror book, or make an economic horror movie, this is it for those countries. I mean, all those factors you just listed out then, any one of those would usually be something for us to be concerned about. And these countries are being hit by all of them. And again, I come back to earlier, I mentioned that, it is good that it's great to see the IMF and the World Bank getting ahead of the curve, because I think we're facing some desperate humanitarian issues and social disruption issues if we are not careful in how we distribute what will be scarce, hopefully a scarcity only for a 6 to 12-month period. But that is a lot longer period than markets are pricing. And if we see, wheat, soy, and other basics start to move up in the same way that I think oil could, then, that is another fresh wave of price inflation to the upside beyond that, what we've already seen, poor countries are going to be heavily hit like a blunt instrument with that reality. I mean, even in the West, in the most sophisticated, wealthiest nations on the world, prices at the grocery store are going to go up. Even in Australia or the United States, which are large agricultural producers, a lot of that agricultural product is determined by international pricing, and there is internal supply chain disruption. So prices are going up everywhere. I guess we haven't really spoken about, Sarah, and I know I'm going a little bit off question here. We don't have much time, but there's one real concern I have is that central banks like the Federal Reserve, that got it wrong on inflation not being transitory and are now so that was their first big mistake, are going to compound that error by raising interest rates aggressively, which I'm forecasting they will, because I don't think they'll figure out what I'm about to say, raising interest rates aggressively to head off inflation that they can't control anyway. And what happens is your economy then gets a double hit of high prices and high interest rates that aren't driving those prices down. And that will really eat into the US economy. And that's why I think US recession. So, the Northern Hemisphere major economies are really at risk on all of this. But we should always remember those countries like Sri Lanka who will really need our help.
Well, I sure hope that we can talk more about that in our next interview, but today I'm afraid that we're running out of time. Clifford Bennett, Chief Economist at ACY Securities, great to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing your perspectives with us.
Wonderful to be on your show. Thank you.
Talk to What will return next Saturday on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. See you then, and good night.